The wind rolled across the treetops like a low whistle from the mountains, stirring dust and pine scent through the warm evening air. Out here, deep inside the untamed frontier jungle where the river sliced the earth like a silver blade, silence wasn't just peace, it was a warning. A man learned young that quiet in the wild meant something was watching. Elias Ryder knew that better than most. He had lived through stampedes, winter starvation, shootouts over cattle and gold. But nothing, not all his rugged years in the saddle, ever taught him how heavy the world felt when the only person riding beside him was his 12-year-old boy. "Hey, you think we'll be home 'fore dark?" his son Caleb asked, shifting in his saddle. The boy tried sounding fearless, but his voice betrayed a hint of worry. The jungle swallowed sunlight quickly and men vanished even faster. "We'll make it," Elias said evenly. "Trail's just long enough to make a man doubt himself, that's all. Keep your eyes forward and ears open." The boy nodded and gripped the reins tighter. He had his father's sharp gaze, the kind that could spot a rattler in tall grass or a rider on the horizon. But he was still a boy, small, bones light, heart still learning the hard rhythm of a cowboy's life. They rode along a narrow canyon path, thick vines hanging over carved sandstone walls, hooves clopping softly on the ground. Water dripped somewhere far off. Birds had gone silent minutes earlier. Elias noticed every detail, too silent. His gut tightened, and a cowboy trusted his gut. He lifted a hand, signaling Caleb to slow. Before he could speak, leaves rustled. Then time exploded. A gunshot cracked like thunder. The horses panicked. Caleb ducked instinctively as a bullet splintered bark inches from his head. "Behind the rock," Elias roared, drawing his revolver. Caleb scrambled behind a fallen log, eyes wide. Shapes moved in the trees. Men, 5 of them, rifles glinting. Bandits. Jungle scavengers who preyed on travelers. Elias fired first. Fast. Accurate. One bandit dropped with a scream. Bullets tore into stone and wood around them. Horses fled. Caleb couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. He'd seen cattle, shot, wolves killed, but men firing at him. His ribs felt locked by fear. "Caleb," Elias barked. "Steady your breathing. Focus. You're all right." The command cut through panic. Caleb steadied, hands trembling but eyes sharp again. Bandits flanked left. Elias fired again, and pain ripped through him like lightning. A crack, then white shock as a bullet slammed into his leg. Bone shattered, he collapsed, clutching his thigh, teeth grit so tight he nearly cracked one. "Pa! Stay down!" Elias yelled, voice strained. 2 bandits rushed in, knives drawn. Elias swung his gun up and shot one in the chest, but the other tackled him, blade flashing. Elias fought, blood in his boot, vision blurring. Caleb rose. Time slowed. That knife was inches from his father's neck. He lifted his father's dropped revolver, hands shaking, and fired. The bandit fell. Silence crushed the world. Only the pounding in Caleb's ears remained. Elias gasped, dragging air like it weighed tons. "You all right?" Caleb cried, voice cracking. Elias forced a grin despite pain burning in his leg like molten metal. "You did good, son." But there was more movement. Another bandit crawling, reaching for his weapon. Caleb didn't hesitate, knocked him out with the butt of the gun before he could aim. The boy trembled but stood firm, proud, terrified. Elias tried to stand and screamed instead. His leg bent wrong, broken brutally. "Pa, we gotta move, they'll have friends." Caleb nodded and slid under his father's arm, lifting him though he barely reached his father's chest. Straining, steps shaking, he dragged Elias deeper into the jungle brush. They reached a mossy stone alcove hidden under vines. Caleb lowered him gently. Elias fought the dizzying pain. "Listen to me," Elias said, voice low but steady. "You saved me." His hand shook as he placed it on Caleb's shoulder. "But we ain't out yet. This jungle don't forgive the weak." Caleb swallowed. "I won't be weak." "I know." Elias's eyes softened briefly. "You're a rider. Caleb gathered branches, tied foliage for cover like his father once taught him. He fetched water from the stream, hands shaking but determined. Elias tightened his belt around his thigh, face white with pain. Night crept in fast. Jungle calls echoed, howls, chirps, low growls. Caleb sat beside his father, revolver across his lap, jaw set firm though tears rimmed his eyes. "You scared?" Elias asked. "Only of losing you," Caleb whispered. Elias's chest tightened. Not from pain, but pride. "Then you'll fight." Somewhere out there, footsteps rustled leaves, searching, hunting. Bandits weren't done. Caleb lifted the gun. "We fight together," he said. Elias nodded. Side by side. And in that dark, dangerous jungle, where fear stalked behind every vine and root, a boy became steel. The jungle listened. The night held its breath. Father and son, alone, wounded, but unbroken. The fight wasn't over, it had just begun. The first light of dawn filtered through the thick jungle canopy, casting mottled shadows on the ground like a moving puzzle. Elias Ryder's head throbbed with pain, each heartbeat sending jolts through his shattered leg. He tried to shift slightly, groaning as the raw agony nearly brought him to his knees, but he forced himself to stay still. Every movement reminded him of the fight, the bullets, the scream of the bandits and the way Caleb had risen so fearlessly to protect him. He couldn't dwell on that now. There was only survival, and the boy beside him was more than just his son. He was now his partner in enduring the merciless jungle. Caleb sat a few feet away, crouched and tense, his small hands busy but trembling slightly as he cleaned his father's revolver and checked the makeshift traps they had set the night before. The boy's face was pale and streaked with dust and grime, but his eyes burned with a fierce focus that made Elias's chest swell with pride despite the pain. The jungle was alive all around them. Sounds of distant waterfalls, birds, and the faint rustle of unseen creatures created a constant symphony that threatened to drown out reason. Caleb had to learn to read it all, to understand what could be trusted and what spelled danger. "Pa," Caleb whispered, "I can go out and see if I can find something to eat." "I'll be careful." Elias shook his head slowly, swallowing hard. "Careful's good, but slow's better. The jungle doesn't forgive mistakes, son. Listen, watch. Think before you move." He felt helpless, leaning heavily on the rock that had been their refuge since the ambush. His hand rested on Caleb's shoulder, gripping tightly. "I know you're strong. I know you can do it. But don't get ahead of yourself." Caleb nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'll be careful, Pa, I promise." Elias forced a faint smile. "Good, take the hatchet. If something comes close, you'll need it." He handed the boy the small tool that could mean the difference between life and death. "And remember what I taught you. The jungle speaks. Pay attention. Every rustle, every movement. Know which ones are danger and which ones are just the wind." The boy nodded again, securing the hatchet to his belt and checking the revolver at his side. Then silently he slipped into the undergrowth, moving with the kind of caution and precision that surprised even Elias. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made Elias wince, imagining bandits, snakes, or predators closing in. He clenched his jaw against the pain, forcing himself to focus on guiding Caleb with his words, even from where he lay. Hours passed slowly. Caleb returned several times with small finds, roots, wild herbs, and edible leaves he had cautiously identified. Each time he approached, Elias guided him, teaching him how to prepare food, how to boil water safely in a tin cup, how to avoid the poisonous plants that lurked behind every bright color. They shared quiet moments, sipping bitter herbal tea that Caleb had prepared, the warmth easing some of the throbbing pain in Elias's leg. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep hope alive. Every act the boy performed, every careful movement, every skillful decision, reinforced the bond between them, transforming fear into quiet determination. By midday, Caleb had set a small snare near a stream they had discovered the day before. Elias watched as the boy worked, body crouched and eyes scanning constantly. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he didn't complain. He knew the first prey might be small, a rabbit or a bird, but it would be sustenance and, more importantly, a lesson in patience and precision. Elias spoke softly, his voice low but firm. reminding Caleb to focus, to breathe, to respect the prey and the jungle alike. The boy absorbed every word, silent and intent, learning that survival demanded not just courage but patience and cunning. As evening approached, the sky darkened under the dense canopy and the jungle shifted again. Distant howls echoed, and the faint crackle of movement told them that predators were already stirring. Caleb dragged the small catch back to their hiding spot, carrying it carefully to avoid attracting attention. Elias guided him in cleaning and preparing it, showing him how to cook over a hidden fire and use smoke to mask their scent. Every motion was meticulous. Every glance toward the surrounding trees was cautious. The bond between father and son deepened with each passing hour, forged in fire, blood, and the relentless demands of survival. Night fell quickly, bringing with it a new layer of danger. The jungle became alive with nocturnal predators, the calls of unseen animals cutting through the darkness. Elias's leg throbbed violently, but he refused to complain, knowing that any sign of weakness might embolden the dangers lurking just beyond their small fire. Caleb stayed close, his revolver and hatchet within easy reach, his eyes never leaving the shadows. The boy had grown beyond his age, hardened by necessity, forced to carry the weight of protecting not only himself but his injured father. Each sound, each movement outside their hidden alcove tested him, but he met every challenge with resolve. Hours stretched on, punctuated by the distant growls of wolves and the occasional rustle that could be nothing, or could be another bandit, still hunting. Elias whispered words of encouragement, teaching Caleb how to listen, how to move quietly, how to anticipate threats before they arrived. The boy's hands ached, his body strained, but he endured. Hunger gnawed at them both, but the lessons of survival were far more vital than immediate comfort. Elias knew that if Caleb learned these skills now, he would survive anything, bandits, wild animals, or the jungle itself. By the time the moon rose, they had a small meal prepared and eaten, their fire carefully hidden beneath damp leaves to avoid detection. Elias's pain was relentless, but the sight of Caleb handling everything with growing confidence and skill eased some of the worry in his chest. The boy had become more than just a son. He was a partner in survival, a young man forced to grow up too quickly but gaining strength and wisdom far beyond his years. The night stretched endlessly, filled with the sounds of the jungle, but neither father nor son wavered. They had endured the ambush, survived the first night, and had begun to learn the delicate balance of life and death in the wild. And somewhere in the shadows, the jungle seemed to acknowledge their resilience. They were wounded but unbroken, hunted but not yet defeated. Elias knew that the coming days would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. But for now, as Caleb sat close, quietly tending to the fire and preparing for whatever tomorrow might bring, they survived, and in survival they found a strength neither had known before. The jungle awoke before the sun did, breathing mist through its roots and whispering life through its leaves. A heavy fog wrapped the ground, thick enough that Caleb could barely see his own boots. The boy rubbed his eyes, sore from staying awake half the night listening to wolves' distant cries and the shifting rustle of leaves that could have been wind, or could have been something worse. Elias had slept in fits, groaning whenever the pain surged through his leg. Now he lay still, pale but alert, his jaw tight like he was wrestling not just pain but fear. A man like Elias didn't fear death. He feared leaving his son alone in the world. Caleb crouched near the dying embers of the fire, stoking them with care. He added only a few small branches, barely enough to warm water. Flames meant life, but they also signaled danger. Smoke was a beacon to predators and men alike. As the pot warmed, Caleb looked at his father, trying to read the unspoken questions in his eyes. Elias didn't like looking weak, and Caleb didn't like seeing him that way. "You feel any better, Pa?" the boy whispered. Elias breathed slow and steady, then forced a half smile. "Feel like I wrestled a bull and lost, but I'm still here." "You will get better," Caleb answered, voice too sharp, as if he needed to convince both of them. "You will. I'll make sure of it." Elias nodded, pride glimmering faintly through exhaustion. "I know, son. Just keep your head clear. This place ain't like our ranch. Every step has teeth." "I know," Caleb whispered, clenching his fists. "I ain't letting nothing get us." A sudden snap in the bushes made both their heads turn. Caleb froze, hand hovering near the revolver. A rabbit scampered out, darting toward the river. The tension released from Caleb's shoulders, but he didn't relax fully. The jungle didn't give warning twice. Elias pushed himself up slowly, using a branch like a crutch. Check the snare again. But move quiet. I ain't liking how the bird stopped chirping just now. Caleb listened. It was true, the jungle held its breath. No fluttering wings, no chittering monkeys. Silence deep enough to suffocate. He nodded and slipped into the trees, each footstep placed like the ground might explode beneath him. The air felt wrong, heavy, watching. The snare lay near the stream bed, and Caleb crept toward it, heart pounding. Relief flooded him when he saw the twitching fur of a rabbit trapped inside. Food. A good sign. But the boy didn't celebrate. He scanned everything first, the bushes, the ground, the branches overhead. Elias had drilled into him since he could walk. Food always comes with risk. He reached down to secure the rabbit, then froze. A boot print fresh deep in the mud. Not theirs. Caleb's stomach dropped. Not an animal's mark. A man's more than one. He counted 3 different sizes in the mud. His breath caught in his throat. They had been there just recently, searching or tracking. Bandits didn't lose interest, not when one of their own had died by a boy's hand. He didn't think. Didn't breathe, just grabbed the rabbit, cut the snare rope free and moved. Slow first, then faster when he reached thicker brush. He imagined eyes behind every tree trunk, rifles aimed from every shadow. His heart hammered loud enough that he swore the whole jungle could hear it. When he reached their hiding place, he slid behind the stone shelter and whispered urgently, "Pa." Elias looked up immediately, reading the panic in the boy's face before a word was spoken. Bandits? Footprints. 3 of them, close. Elias cursed under his breath, trying to shift his weight. The movement sent white-hot pain shooting through his leg. Caleb rushed to steady him. "No," Elias growled. "You listen. We ain't running. Not with my leg like this, but we can't stay blind neither. You load the rifle, quiet. Then move our stuff deeper under the rocks. Cover tracks with leaves." Caleb obeyed without hesitation. His fingers trembled, but he forced them steady. The boy moved like a ghost, sweeping dirt and branches over their footprints, hiding any sign of human presence. He dragged their small pile of supplies, bandages, dried strips of meat, the pot, deeper into shadow. Elias kept watch, forcing himself upright despite the agony. Minutes stretched long and tense. Every crack of a twig in the distance made them flinch. The jungle felt alive in a new way now, not just wild, but hunting. Elias spoke low and firm. "Sit still. Don't show fear. Fear makes noise." Caleb nodded, sitting beside him, gripping the rifle so tight his knuckles whitened. Time crawled. Then voices drifted through the trees, low, guttural, angry. Caleb's blood froze. "Boy shot him. Ain't leaving till we find him. Tracks went this way. They're close." Elias placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, steadying him even while sweat rolled down his own face. Caleb didn't breathe. The bandits rustled closer, the scrape of boots on bark, the crunch of weight on leaves. Shadows stretched along the ground as figures passed between trees. One voice barked a laugh, rough like gravel. Another muttered curses. A third sniffed the air like a predator. They were less than 30 feet away. Caleb's heart beat so hard it shook his ribs. He pressed against the stone wall, praying they wouldn't look down. Elias squeezed his shoulder once, hard, reminding him to stay stone still. Bootsteps stopped. One bandit's voice drifted, suspicious and sharp. "Fire smoke. I smell it. They're close." Caleb's stomach twisted. Elias whispered so quietly the wind almost swallowed it. "Be still, son." A moment stretched like eternity. Then a sudden howl echoed in the distance. Wolves far but loud enough to catch the men's attention. Damn wolves again. "We'll sweep the right side. The old man and boy can't get far." More rustling. Their footsteps faded. Silence crept back like something fragile afraid to exist. Caleb exhaled shakily. Elias finally relaxed enough to slump back, panting through clenched teeth. "You did good, boy," Elias whispered. "Better'n most men grown." Caleb swallowed hard. "They'll come back." "Aye, they will." "Which means we move now." Caleb stared at him. "You can't walk. I can crawl." Elias gritted his teeth. "And you'll help me when I stumble." "We ain't dying because I'm busted." Caleb's throat burned. He didn't want to cry, tears wasted strength. He nodded and slid under his father's arm, lifting him gently. Elias groaned but steadied himself, leaning on the boy. They moved slow, painfully slow, but every foot forward was defiance. Caleb guided him deeper through brush, following animal trails instead of paths humans would take. They passed thorn thickets, thick vines, moss-covered stones. Elias stopped often, breathing raggedly, sweat soaking his shirt. Caleb wiped his forehead like a son tending a king fallen from a throne. Hours passed, turning the sun to a dim golden flame above the canopy. When Caleb finally found a narrow cave tucked between huge roots and stones, relief crashed over him like cool water. It was hidden deep enough to shelter them and dry. He helped Elias inside, easing him down gently. Elias caught his breath, then put a hand on the boy's cheek. His voice cracked. Not from weakness, but from pride too heavy to carry alone. "You saved us today, Caleb." The boy shook his head. "We saved each other," Elias smiled faintly. "That's how men survive in this world." Outside, night began creeping through the jungle and the cries of predators rose once more. But inside that small cave, father and son sat shoulder to shoulder, wounded but unbroken, hunted but not defeated. They had outlasted danger again, but they knew the jungle wasn't done with them yet. Tomorrow would bring new trials, and they would face them together. Night wrapped itself around the jungle like a thick blanket, heavy and breathing with unseen life. Elias lay awake, shifting only enough to ease the pressure on his broken leg. Pain throbbed in steady waves, a cruel reminder that one wrong move, one missed sound, could mean death for both him and his boy. Caleb rested beside him, wrapped in a thin blanket of woven leaves and pelt. The young boy's face was smudged with dirt, his clothes torn from days of struggle, but exhaustion softened him into peaceful stillness. Elias watched him with a fragile mix of pride and fear. He prayed silently, not to a church god, but to the earth, to the sky, to the dust they came from. "Let the boy wake tomorrow. Let him stay strong. Let me hold on long enough to get him home." Every crack of the brush, every distant growl or fluttering wing kept Elias alert. The jungle was never still, not even in deep darkness. Strange whistles echoed from the treetops, followed by the soft, dragging sound of something slithering across earth. In the far distance, a jaguar roared, shaking the branches above them. Elias gripped the sharpened stick he had beside him, knowing it was a pitiful defense but still refusing to let his instincts rest. A cowboy never slept deep on the trail. Survival meant waking to danger before it touched you. Tonight would be no exception. Near dawn, Caleb stirred, eyes blinking open. For a moment, he looked like a child again, just a boy waking from dreams, unaware of hardship. Then the world returned to him and his expression steeled. "Pa, I heard something moving out there last night," he whispered. Elias nodded. "You keep that spear close yet?" Caleb lifted the crude spear he'd built from a branch and a stone blade. Elias tried to smile, but pain tugged his lips. "Good. We got one more day of hell to walk before we're out of this." Caleb checked the splint again, careful and steady. The boy's hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. Elias hid the ache in his chest that came from watching his son suffer. When they set out, Elias leaned heavily on a long branch, using it as a crutch. Caleb carried most of the supplies, not that there was much left. The jungle floor was slick with moisture, and each uneven patch felt like punishment. Birds screeched overhead as if announcing their struggle to every predator within earshot. Hours passed, measured only by Elias's ragged breaths and Caleb's quiet grunts as he cut through thick vines with a sharp stone. The forest seemed to resist their progress, as if wanting to keep them trapped within its clawed embrace. Elias tried not to show his fatigue, but sweat soaked his shirt and his vision blurred. At one point his leg buckled and he fell heavily. Caleb rushed to him. "Pa, you can't—" Elias held up a hand, gasping. "I can and I will. Ain't dying in no jungle." He forced himself upright, teeth grit, and Caleb saw in his father not pain but fire, a stubborn fire strong enough to bite death in the teeth. They came upon a river by midday, water rushing cold and fierce between moss-slick rocks. Caleb knew they needed water, but the river had dangers of its own. He scanned the banks, no crocodiles, no strange ripples. He filled their canteen while Elias stayed watch, leaning against a tree, every muscle tight. Caleb splashed water on his face and neck, shivering at the chill. He looked over at Elias and spoke in a low voice. "If we make it out of here, Pa, we'll tell the boys in town? This'll be the biggest cowboy tale ever." Elias chuckled, then winced. "Reckon it will. But I ain't ready to be no legend just yet. Legends are dead men. I prefer breathing." Crossing the river became the next battle. Caleb found a shallow area, but the current still pulled strong. He helped Elias inch across, step by painful step, water nearly knocking them down. Elias leaned on Caleb more than he liked, but the boy didn't complain once. When they reached the opposite bank, both collapsed on the dirt, gasping. After a short rest, they continued, driven by an instinct older than any wilderness. Get out or die trying. Toward afternoon, a rustling came from the bushes ahead. Caleb raised his spear, body tensing. Elias slowly positioned himself behind a fallen log for cover. Leaves parted and a huge boar burst out, tusks long and curved like wicked knives. Caleb froze only a second before instinct took over. He jumped aside just as the beast charged past where he'd been standing. Elias shouted, "Stay behind it! Don't let it pin you." Caleb ran, dodging trees as the boar wheeled around and charged again. Elias grabbed a stone and hurled it, striking the animal's side. The distraction bought Caleb a chance. When the boar lunged again, he braced himself and thrust the spear forward. The sharpened stone pierced the creature's neck. It squealed, thrashing violently, but Caleb held firm until the beast collapsed. Breathless, trembling, the boy stepped back. Elias stared with awe and relief. "That was a man's fight," he rasped. Caleb wiped sweat and tears from his face, shaking all over. Elias beckoned him closer and rested a hand on his shoulder. "I knew you were strong, but today, son, you proved you're more than just strong. You're brave." Caleb nodded silently, not trusting his voice. They cooked what meat they could manage, smoke rising thin and fast. It tasted gamey, but filled their bellies and refreshed their strength. This time, when Elias stood, he didn't sway as badly. Caleb slung what meat remained, and together they moved forward again. Deeper into the forest, but with renewed will. As light dimmed and fireflies danced through the trees like sparks from a campfire, Elias caught sight of something through the branches, a ridge rising ahead. Beyond that ridge lay open land, freedom. Caleb followed his gaze and hope burst across his face like dawn. "We made it, Pa," he choked. Elias put a hand on his shoulder again, firmer this time. "Not yet, but we're near enough to taste it." Darkness crept in, but for the first time in days, neither fear nor despair claimed them fully. They built a small fire, kept low and shielded by stones, and lay beside it, listening to the night. The jungle still breathed around them, but its growls felt less threatening now. Elias stared at the sky between branches, and Caleb rested close, hand on his father's arm. No words passed between them, but none were needed. They were alive. They were warriors. And they were almost free. Morning came like a gentle promise. Sunlight crawling slowly through the trees, stretching warm fingers over leaves and settling on the small camp where father and son lay resting. Elias woke before Caleb, as he often did in better times, and for a brief heartbeat he forgot the pain in his leg. Forgot the jungle. Forgot the battles they fought. He simply watched his son breathe, chest rising and falling softly, the face of a boy carved into that of a survivor. When Caleb opened his eyes, there was no sluggishness, no dreamy confusion, just determination. That was how the jungle had changed him. Innocence traded for grit, childhood traded for courage. Elias sat up with effort, wincing but refusing to show weakness. His broken leg throbbed, but he had learned to live with the ache. Caleb handed him a strip of dried boar meat. They ate quietly, each chewing slowly, savoring the small energy the food offered. When Caleb stood and packed their things, the boy's movements were steady, practiced. No trace left of the child who once jumped fences for fun and chased stray horses just to prove he could. Jungle life had sharpened him like a blade forged in flame. They started walking, Elias leaning on his wooden crutch, Caleb supporting him now and then. The forest seemed thinner today, as if stepping aside in reluctant respect. Branches were spaced farther, the air smelled less damp and wild. Birds chirped instead of shrieked. For the first time since their fight with the raiders that led them into this hell, the world did not feel like an enemy. Hours passed with slow but steady progress. Elias muttered small bits of trail wisdom as they walked, not to teach, but because talking anchored him to consciousness, kept him from giving in to exhaustion. Caleb responded with nods or short breaths, saving energy, saving strength. Eventually, they reached the ridge they had seen the night before. Up close, it loomed tall and intimidating, earth sloping steep and rocky. Elias stared at it, jaw tightening. Caleb stepped forward. "I'll climb up first, Pa. I'll check what's beyond." Elias grabbed his shoulder. "No, we go together. I ain't letting you out of my sight." But his leg trembled, and he knew climbing with it would be a monstrous task. Caleb understood too, but instead of arguing, he slid under his father's arm, bracing him. Then we climbed together. They moved slowly, one agonizing step at a time. Rocks shifted under their feet. Elias nearly slipped twice, pain ripping through his leg like fire, but Caleb held firm, refusing to let him fall. Sweat rolled down their faces, soaking their clothes. When they finally reached the top, they both collapsed, gasping for breath. And then, they saw it. Open plains stretched far and golden, dotted with sparse trees swaying in a soft wind. No choking vines, no monstrous shadows, just freedom. Far off, smoke curled lazily from what looked like a camp or settlement, a sign of civilization. Elias felt his chest tighten, not with pain, but with relief so overwhelming he almost cried. Caleb grinned, tears in his eyes. "Pa, we made it." They rested only a few minutes before beginning the descent. Going down was easier, though slower for Elias. The jungle behind them thinned more with every step until it felt like nothing but a distant nightmare. When they reached the flat plains below, Caleb let out a shaky laugh, short, disbelieving, but real. Elias smiled back, eyes crinkling. "Told ya. Cowboy spirit don't die easy." They started walking toward the distant camp smoke, Caleb leading slightly but always watching his father's steps. Wind brushed their faces, carrying scents of dust and roamed earth, not rotten fungus. They were weak, battered, but every step was lighter than the last. Eventually, the shape of a small shack came into view. Weathered wood, a horse tied outside, and a fire pit with embers still warm. Elias felt hope lift his heart. Help. Safety. As they neared, a dog barked, bursting from behind the shack. Caleb instinctively stood in front of Elias, ready to defend. But instead of attacking, the dog stopped and sniffed the air, tail wagging cautiously. It could sense their frailty, their fight, their desperation. A moment later, the shack door creaked open and a rugged old man stepped out, rifle in hand. His eyes narrowed when he saw them. Two figures worn to bone, clothes shredded, faces carved by hardship. Elias raised both hands, breathing heavy. "I ain't looking for trouble. Just escaped some. My boy saved me. Need a doctor, maybe a horse into town?" The old man studied them silently. Then slowly he lowered his rifle. "You two been through hell," he muttered, voice rough like gravel. "Come on. I got bandages. And stew left from mornin'." Relief washed over Elias so hard his knees wobbled. Caleb steadied him again. Together they walked into the safety of the stranger's yard. The old man helped lay Elias down on a cot, checked his leg, and whistled low. "You held on tough," he said quietly. "Could have died in that jungle." Elias looked over at Caleb, voice low. "I lived because of him." Caleb sat beside his father, tired eyes bright with pride and lingering fear. The old man brought water, fresh bread, and steaming stew. Caleb ate slow, knowing his father needed tending first. Elias drank deeply and exhaled a long breath, one that felt like it carried every nightmare from the jungle out of his chest and into the dirt. Later, as the sun set behind wide plains and painted the sky in gold and orange, Elias rested, head turned toward Caleb. "Son," he whispered, voice cracked, "we walked through death together. And you carried me out." Caleb shook his head, swallowing emotion. "No, Pa, you taught me how to survive. I just didn't want to lose you." Elias reached for his son's hand and squeezed weakly. "You didn't just save my life, boy. You proved you're a man, a true cowboy." Caleb leaned his head down, shoulders shaking just once under the weight of it all. When he lifted it again, pride glowed in his eyes. Not childish pride, but earned, hard-won, carved from fire pride. Elias closed his eyes, finally able to rest without fear. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, soft, peaceful, carrying the song of freedom. They had entered the jungle as a cowboy and his boy. They left it as survivors, blood-bonded, spirit unbroken. No legend, no storybook tale. Just life, fought for and won. And in the quiet of dusk, father and son breathed safe air again, knowing whatever storms life brought next, they would face them together. Because a cowboy may fall, but a cowboy never quits. And with a son like Caleb, a cowboy never falls alone.